we're going to keep the conversation going because that was an extremely inspiring illustration of what's possible. And I entirely agree with Ted that it's already happening. And so we wanted to talk a little bit with some interesting folks in very different contexts across the country to think about where they're at, what kind of work they're doing, how it fits or not with what Ted presented, and what's next. Because I believe, as Ted said, each of us can contribute to the kind of transformational change in our communities that we see there. Ted's been doing this a while. They've got a head start, but we see it can work, and it's already happening. So this is going to be a really fun conversation about what is happening. So I'm not going to read the bios of our panelists here. They're all on SCED on the website. I want to get right into the interesting work that they're doing. We're going to start with some quick questions about where you're coming from, and then dive into what resourcing innovation means in those contexts, and circle back to the insights from Ted's talk in the time we have. So Wendy, if we can start with you. You're Executive Director of the Northumberland Community Futures Development Corporation. Ted was talking about the importance of local capital. I was thinking, the CFDC's community capital is a huge agent for change and investment in communities. But your work, in fact, was just recognized by FedDev Ontario, the federal regional development agency for Southern Ontario, as a woman of influence. So what's the context you're facing in Northumberland County? Tell us about your region and the context you're working in.
Okay, thank you. Before I answer your question, I just want to do a shout out to our author and speaker, and also endorse the concepts that you introduced in the book, which I thought to be really intellectually stimulating, and get us to think about things and maybe use language that we haven't used before. Although I'm very colorful with language, I must say. But in terms of some of the concepts that you put into the book, we're actually, all of us, not just here in Northumberland, but we're working with it in our own communities. And one of the things that you talked about was wealth creation, and it just made so much sense to me because in Northumberland, we are working with an organization right now that is creating wealth. And it's 100% of it is being retained in our community. And people don't look at that organization that way. And so it's actually been very helpful to me recently to be able to reposition that organization for what they truly are. But in terms of what we're doing here in Northumberland, well, we have the deep pleasure of working with our colleagues across Eastern Ontario very closely, who are all working in similar ways in their own communities. And our major customer is the federal government. And we do look at the federal government as a customer. They may not like that. They may not be comfortable with that, but we're very comfortable with that because we do a lot of work with them in terms of driving the innovation agenda, not just in Northumberland area, but across Eastern Ontario in cooperation and collaboration with our partners. But my organization is a not-for-profit. We determined a few years ago that we're not constrained by any particular program. We are a CFDC, that's a national program, but it's just a program. What we really are is an NGO providing financing and strategy to entrepreneurs with a particular bend in innovation, not just to the entrepreneurs in the business community, but community at large. Am I up in time yet?
That's a great introduction.
Okay.
And we'll get to the interesting things you've done next. But je veux passer maintenant à Michael. Vous êtes directeur général de la Commission de développement économique des Premières Nations du Québec et du Labrador. Qu'est-ce que ça mange en hiver? Vous travaillez où? Qu'est-ce que vous faites?
Premièrement, bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup à M. Howard pour sa très intéressante présentation. Évidemment, le titre de notre panel, c'est Resourcing Innovation. Trouver les ressources pour l'innovation. Puis c'est un peu ça qu'on fait à la CDE-PNQL. Les ressources, c'est les ressources humaines, hein, c'est les gens du terrain. Pour nous, c'est ça. On est une organisation qui qui est en fait une créature, je dirais, de l'Assemblée des Premières Nations du Québec et du Labrador. On est le volet développement économique. Donc, on couvre un territoire très grand, c'est-à-dire toute la province de Québec, toutes les 43 communautés du Québec. Donc, les communautés conventionnées CRI, les communautés non conventionnées. Notre membership, nous, dans le fond, c'est les agents de développement économique communautaire de toutes les communautés. Donc, notre première clientèle à la base, c'est ces gens-là. On travaille avec eux en renforcement des capacités. Donc, on fait des formations, puis tout ça, puis en support technique. Donc, on les aide à réaliser les mandats qu'ils ont à faire dans leur communauté. Puis, en plus de ça, on a un autre volet où on travaille avec les entrepreneurs. Donc, autant les entrepreneurs individuels, privés, que les entrepreneurs sociaux qui veulent se partir des coopératives ou peu importe la forme d'entreprise sociale qui veulent partir. Donc, on les aide dans le chemin de l'entrepreneuriat, donc dans le chemin aussi de pouvoir créer des opportunités dans leur communauté, créer de l'emploi, créer comment je pourrais dire, des projets structurants aussi, des projets structurants qui encadrent un peu la vie sur les communautés. Donc, nous, on ne fait pas le développement économique pour les communautés. Ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on essaie du mieux qu'on peut d'aider les communautés à être habilitées à créer le développement économique chez elles. Donc, on est un peu un service de deuxième ligne, d'une certaine façon. Là, on n'est pas des fois, on est en première ligne, parce que des fois, il y a des communautés qui n'ont pas nécessairement d'agent de développement économique, quelqu'un qui est chevronné. Dans ce temps-là, on va aller aider directement sur le terrain. Mais de manière générale, nous, vraiment notre façon de voir les choses, puis en fait, ça nous est même imposé par la table des chefs de la PNQL, parce que le but, c'est que chacune des communautés est autonome. Donc, chacune des communautés est autodéterminée. Fait que nous, on ne peut pas arriver là avec des biais, on ne peut pas arriver là avec une idée de ce qu'ils devraient faire. Ce qu'on doit faire, c'est leur fournir l'aide, les connaissances, puis les ressources pour pouvoir réaliser ce qu'ils voient que le terrain a besoin.
Donc, c'est un cadre légal, structurel très particulier. On a vu hier soir, parmi les prix des sociétés d'aide au développement des collectivités de l'Ontario, un beau projet de partenariat entre les Premières Nations et les milieux ruraux, les municipalités ruraux. Puis, je pense qu'il y a des conditions semblables, mais en même temps, aussi un contexte très particulier pour vous autres. Piquet. If we can move to you. You're involved in a wide range of activities, actually, in your bio. Tell us a bit about them and perhaps the common thread that got you there.
Okay, you can hear me, I hope. All right, thank you for that great talk, Ted. I've turned that around. TED Talk, Talk Ted. I am a size, gender, white, immigrant, Gen X-ish, single mom of a 19-year-old girl who, and I work at the intersection of entrepreneurship, innovation, and feminism. I have a background in journalism, entrepreneurship myself. I've run a cleaning company, an artisan dairy called Fifth Town Artisan Cheese, which maybe some of you know. It was Canada's 8th B Corporation several years ago, and won a bunch of awards for sustainability. And right now I run a consulting company and a digital media company. The consulting side works with incubators and accelerators on basically advancing feminist management, design, operating principles for startups and new businesses, and also a magazine called Lisbeth, which is about feminist entrepreneurship. So that's where I work and sort of what I do. Do you want me to stop there?
Let's keep going. We'll get into a bit more detail on the second round, which is about in the context that you're working with, the initiatives you're doing. What's been the common thread, the special sort of challenge you've been doing? We can keep going with you, PK. Obviously, women and diverse entrepreneurs, I think it's safe to say, aren't well served by existing incubators and accelerators. Helping to build equitable and inclusive local economies is, I think, part of what you're getting into. How do the resources need to be different for the groups that you're working with?
So entrepreneurship and innovation is at the center of economic policy, just about everywhere, I would say. A lot of jurisdictions, whether it's at the municipal, the provincial, or federal level, are pouring a lot of money into that. But we need to look at how gender plays into how spending happens at the innovation level. So let's say, for example, if we look at the 8-9 superclusters that have been funded, biotech, oceans, and things like that, all 9 of them are male-dominated sectors. So the majority of our innovation dollars tends to go towards male-dominated sectors. And when we look at the incubator and accelerator spaces, we're finding that they are also highly, let's say, not very equal spaces when it comes to gender. And when I say gender, I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about other marginalized genders as well. And a recent report done by the University of Ottawa in concert with Dr. Barbara Orser from Telfer University. She's one of Canada's top researchers in women's entrepreneurship, along with Wendy Zukier, who many of you may know about at Ryerson, who is also leading the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub now, did a study called the I2 Report. And they interviewed about 166 different incubator and accelerator programs across Ontario, including the RICs, the Regional Innovation Centers. And they found that only 44% of those interviewed have even considered gender and diversity in their recruitment. Almost all, close to all, don't actually capture in any meaningful way gender statistics. And 68% of them do not include gender equity and inclusion in their training programs for their personnel. And what they're finding is that, so what we have here is a system that doesn't recognize that diversity, inclusion, and gender equity actually requires acquiring new skills, new language, and different frameworks. A lot of the folks running them, and no disrespect, but I think we've probably all heard this, I don't need special training in gender equity. I have a wife, I have a daughter, I'm good. And it takes a lot more than that in order to really make a difference. So we have noticed quite a bit of inequity in the innovation and entrepreneurship space, not only in how we teach it, but also in capital markets, which most of you also hear. And despite all the 6-7 years in capital markets, the recent venture capital report that came out once again points out not a lot of women partners, not a lot of capital going towards women-led ventures. And despite all the rhetoric over the last 7, 8, 9 years, we're still making very, very little progress. And part of the reason for that is, as some people might have started to talk about, is you can't just add women in STIR or add Indigenous people in STIR. You have to actually build something new from the ground up. So that's part of what the conversation that's coming out of these studies.
Super. Now, Wendy, Northumberland County has been recognized actually as a leader in innovation with your accelerators and labs, the amazing stuff you've been doing. Tell us a bit more, and what's your secret?
Oh, well, I think, wow, if I knew the secret, I'd bottle it up and sell it. That would be one of the latest women entrepreneurial kind of things to do. But seriously, I think it all comes down to people being willing to think outside the box and dream in color. I really do believe that. And I think whenever we move anything forward, that doesn't matter whether it's my CFTC or the region or your organizations, whatever, I believe very deeply in the power of people and getting those ideas out there and trying to break down any of the barriers that are in the way. So, for example, I'm going to make a general assumption that everybody here goes to work every day to do a wonderful job. I think you probably do. And if you didn't, it's probably more a business process that got in the way. And we should be examining those kinds of things on a regular basis and change them. And so if what we're doing at Northumberland, and we don't do it alone, we do it with all our colleagues, is we actually look at the business processes and trying to change them and really adopt what I call well, it's not what I call, there's a lot of literature on black box thinking. And if you haven't read the books and so on that, I would encourage you to do that. But really what it is if something fails, let's not be afraid of the failure. Let's capture it, learn from it, twist and, move it forward. So, and I think we talked a little bit about those kinds of ideas at lunch today too, For example, the Government of Canada has the women's entrepreneurship strategies that are rolling out. And that speaks to, in some ways, about doing things differently. I'm not sure of all the projects that they have chosen for support, but I know you are involved in one, we are involved in one in Northumberland, and we're working with our colleagues across the East to maybe extend it. But really, it speaks to being inclusive, getting at the things that are in the way, and then creating a program, as you said, from the bottom up that addresses that, and getting women, in this case, at the table, and being involved in where we're taking the nation. And so at a very small micro level, that's what we're trying to do in Northumberland. It's just that simple. Examine what we're doing, improve it, have a little bit of moonshot thinking, and go get the job done.
Super. Michael, vous êtes confronté, par contre, à une réalité très particulière. On a parlé du contexte, l'environnement structurel. Pour vous, bref, c'est la loi sur les Indiens qui régit beaucoup de comment votre contexte, vos structures existent. Autant que par ton expérience comme PDG du commission et auparavant dans le secteur financier, quelles contraintes est-ce que ça impose sur le développement économique, tant pour les Premières Nations que pour les Autochtones vivant en milieu urbain actuellement, et quelles sont les priorités pour vous?
Premièrement, je ne suis pas PDG. Non, je suis juste directeur général. Je ne suis pas président du conseil d'administration en même temps. Je pense que c'est une distinction importante. La loi sur les Indiens. La loi sur les Indiens, c'est ce qui structure tout pour les Premières Nations qui vivent sur réserve. Ça, c'est autant la gouvernance locale, les limites des pouvoirs locaux. Puis quand ce n'est pas écrit dans la loi sur les Indiens, c'est les lois d'application générale qu'on appelle qui s'appliquent, donc celles qui ont cours dans la province où la communauté est située. La loi sur les Indiens, souvent, ça a été un moteur de beaucoup de préjugés pour les Premières Nations, envers les Premières Nations, c'est-à-dire le fait qu'il y a l'exemption fiscale là, de par l'article 87, puis l'insaisissabilité de par l'article 89. Donc, les Premières Nations ne paient pas de taxes puis quand ils sont sur réserve. Puis deuxièmement, les Premières Nations sont insaisissables, mais quand ils sont sur réserve aussi, là, mais c'est les biens qui sont situés sur réserve. Ça, ce que ça fait, c'est qu'il y a plusieurs incompréhensions par rapport à ça. Une des premières incompréhensions à laquelle moi j'ai été confronté, c'est que les gens pensent que peu importe où un Indien inscrit vit, c'est un statut. Excusez-moi, j'ai entendu quelqu'un dire First Nations. Moi, je parle du statut tel qu'indiqué sur la carte. Je sais très bien qu'on dit généralement Première Nation, mais le statut écrit sur la carte, c'est de ça que je parle, qui découle de la loi sur les Indiens. Je ne veux pas heurter personne, mais c'est juste de ça que je parle. Puis moi-même, je suis un Indien inscrit.
Puis, on va revenir sur les impacts du colonialisme au-delà de la loi tantôt. Mais vous voulez peut-être finir avec comment est-ce que vous travaillez à l'intérieur des politiques et des lois actuellement mettant dans le logement?
Oui, en fait, c'est qu'un des gros obstacles par rapport à ça, au niveau du financement, c'est que l'insaisissabilité fait que les gens qui veulent ne peuvent pas avoir des hypothèques immobilières classiques. Donc, dans le domaine du logement, ça cause c'est un gros obstacle, ce qui fait que la plupart de l'habitation, dans la majorité des communautés, en tout cas au Québec, c'est des habitations communautaires. Donc, tout est possédé par le conseil. Puis, étant donné la croissance très forte de la population, puis le plafond qui a été mis sur les transferts fédéraux, ça fait qu'il y a une crise du logement. Puis là, présentement, chez les Premières Nations, on n'a pas exactement les mêmes outils qu'on aurait à l'extérieur d'une communauté pour pouvoir construire, étant donné que la loi sur les Indiens constitue un obstacle.
Merci. So I want to come back now to the talk we just heard. And some of the key points he made. two of the things that stood out for me in the book, The Making of a Democratic Economy, first was the systemic nature of the challenges we face, right? And that's, I think, particularly hard because I think so many of us are entirely absorbed with our immediate work, right? We're stretched just to do the job we have to do, and so to understand it as part of a bigger systemic response to the challenges we're facing is hard. The second, of course, is the applicability of that model to a wide range of settings. And so I wanted to check in with our panelists to see how the ideas in the book resonated for you. PK, do you want to start in terms of the connections you see between your work and what Ted describes? And feminism has been, perhaps in the past, a bad word. We have a prime minister who describes himself as feminist now. Where do you think we're at? And I'd be interested to hear more about the 5 principal feminist areas.
Oh boy, I got the big feminist question. Okay, maybe I'll start by just referring to Ted's talk. And I was really, and also the book, which I read in full. Thank you for, it's a great read, by the way. I highly recommend everybody get it. It's not a super long read, so I appreciated that too. Unlike surveillance capitalism, which, you know, you have to pay extra on the plane in order to take it with you. Anyways, so what I was really interested in is the principles that Ted talked about, which was around labor, the fact that place matters, and inclusion. And I thought about this in terms of what would a feminist say about its principles if we're talking about a feminist economy. And I also have to say that none of these concepts are competing. I see them as different lenses. Like if I take these pair of glasses off, I have a very different view of the room than I have when I have them on. And I think of feminism as a lens that is particularly good at X-raying or 3Ding, amplifying systems of power, and then how we can look at that, and then looking in particular at how power, who has it, how they use it, and how that affects gender, can be extended to any analysis of power. So back to labor, place, and inclusion, I thought, well, if we were talking about a feminist economy, we would be talking about caregiving in the labor market and how we value caregiving or disvalue it. We'd be talking about power, power with, power over, power to. We'd be talking about agency and how to create a sense of agency and belonging. We'd be talking about generativity, which is about how do your activities not just serve yourself or a smaller group, but how do you make 1 + 1 = 5? We talk about whole humanness and really rethinking our relationship to work and how we do work. Is it really a 9-to-5 thing? Are our cities structured in ways that allow us to be whole humans? Usually not. Your caregiving services are like, 10 subway stops away from your work. And what would cities look like if we actually designed them around a different view of work? And also fairness. So those are just some of the principles that I thought, if we're looking at 2 different lenses, those are the things that would jump out to me. What was the other question?
I was just going to say, sign me up to that. That sounds really good. So,
Go ahead.
between, I think you'd answer the question in terms of the connections with Ted's framework. They're different complementary lenses for understanding how we can transform the systemic challenges we face.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got it all. That was amazing.
Oh, okay.
But we can come back. We'll have a bit more time.
You don't want to talk about the hierarchy now?
Maybe we'll save that. That's good. Discussion afterwards. Wendy, Northumberland's CFDC one program. I like that approach that you said. How do your many programs fit with the democratic economy principles that Ted has outlined?
Well, is this on? Oh, it is. A lot of what we're trying to get done is to actually just stimulate investment in innovation, like real investment in innovation, and get people to actually change the way that they behave. Because I guess our theory is that unless people change their behavior, you actually don't have innovation. You just have a good idea and everybody talking about it. But if we don't actually change and adopt change, then we have not innovated. So with that in mind, some of the things that we do at the CF is, it doesn't really matter what the business process is. We try to incorporate technology into it to try and make it faster and all of those benefits that you would normally get, but at the same time, to get rid of some of the bias that might be in there. So for example, we'll be launching in the very near future a women's entrepreneurial loan fund that'll be driven by AI, and it will take all the bias, theoretically take the bias out of the lending equation, and that'll be live in the very near future. Because as people, and no matter what the decision process is, we have, even when we don't realize we have biases, we have them, and that's not necessarily a bad thing necessarily, we just have to recognize. And so what we're trying to do is test something, and we try to do a lot of testing and piloting new ideas and new ways to be inclusive in the various programs of what we do, and share them and hopefully scale them.
I think your principle about adopting change, I think that's exactly what Beatrice said this morning about the Quebec's vision of social innovation, in fact, is it's really got to change practices. So it's an interesting reinforcement. But just very briefly, when we spoke earlier, you gave the example of the police force in the region. And
Yeah,
how
it's
you
kind of, I can't give you too much details because, but let me give it to you in a conceptual way. The police forces in Ontario are operate under provincial legislation, and within that legislation, they're paid for more or less by the municipality under which they serve. And so, and that's under different legislation. So our particular police force has, independent of all that, developed, I call it a social enterprise, but that's just to make it easier for them to actually contextualize what they're doing. Really what it is a for-profit business that is a SaaS model, and they're doing national work in a very highly competitive business.
software as a service. SaaS.
Yeah, so what's really, I think, cool about it is that the profit, and this is where your book actually helped me recently in a bunch of discussions where I was busy in, it's place-based, where 100% of the earnings that they make are actually being plowed right back into the community. And I don't think there's too many organizations that actually do that. And I use the words extracted. I thought I'm very proud of myself to throw these concepts around locally, but I mean, this is an organization whose business growth has gone from 7 employees over the last 3 years to 40. And all of the wealth that they produce are staying in our community, and I see them as an anchor institution. And they need to be viewed and respected that way. And I think that's part of the issue for me, is that trying to help others to view them with respect. Because usually what happens on a municipal side is that it doesn't matter what the service is, people take it from a cost perspective. How do we keep the cost low? And they only define cost as just, you know, whatever check they've written. But there's a human cost too. So when I'm listening to all this discussion about living wages and so on, we need to actually change the conversation, I think, to really move these kinds of things forward. Because if you have an organization like that one that's actually producing jobs, producing and creating that wealth, and which 100% goes back to the municipal taxpayer, hello, how many of those do we have hanging around out there? I mean, that's pretty special. And so I'm a big believer we get behind them and help them to grow even more. So.
Super, thank you. Michael, il y a un chapitre dans le livre de Ted qui parle de comment son approche a été appliquée, ou plutôt traduite, pour la communauté Lakota de Pine Ridge aux États-Unis. Est-ce que cette histoire a eu des résonances pour vous?
Oui, c'est sûr. En fait, ça m'a rappelé un peu, là, au départ, il parle du fait que lui puis son associé sont arrivés là, puis il faisait des présentations. Comment on va faire ça, comment on va... Puis il y avait une réception plutôt mitigée. Puis ça m'a un peu confronté par rapport à notre propre approche, nous, qui est pourtant une organisation des Premières Nations pour les Premières Nations. C'est sûr que la plupart des gens avec qui je travaille sont des Premières Nations, mais ils ont été formés Leur esprit a été façonné dans des institutions qui ne sont pas des institutions des Premières Nations. Oui, évidemment, ils ont le vécu. Il y en a plusieurs qui proviennent de des communautés, mais quand tu sors de la communauté, tu te mêles à la pensée dominante, hein, tranquillement, pas vite. Là, fait que je me suis rendu compte en lisant ce que M. Howard a écrit, qu'il fallait aussi des fois repenser notre approche, même nous qui sommes chez les Premières Nations, que pour mieux écouter, pour prendre le temps de travailler plus longtemps avec les gens avec qui on travaille, pour avoir la patience, dans le fond, du processus d'extraire des idées, de bien reconnaître les besoins, puis tout ça. Ça, c'est un élément que j'ai trouvé très, très intéressant. Pourtant, ça semble évident, mais quand on est dans le tourbillon du quotidien, des fois, on oublie ces choses-là. On a une visite, une journée, puis on a un objectif, on veut l'atteindre. Puis des fois, on oublie un peu de se mettre au diapason avec les personnes qu'on sert. Ensuite de ça, une autre chose que j'ai trouvée très intéressante, c'est une chose qui, des fois, on oublie, mais les communautés des Premières Nations sont encore tissées très, très serrées, puis c'est une force sur laquelle on peut bâtir. On a tendance, nous, on a beaucoup travaillé chez les Premières Nations là, au Québec. On a beaucoup le conseil de bande qui est comme un peu l'entrepreneur principal de la communauté. Qui prend les décisions, puis tout ça, puis qui construit les entreprises avec des bonnes intentions, évidemment. Puis ensuite de ça, les entrepreneurs privés, mais le potentiel des liens serrés de la communauté, puis tout ça qui ont mené un peu au projet immobilier là, duquel il est question dans le livre, ben on n'a pas vraiment exploité ce potentiel-là. Puis je pense que c'est une avenue intéressante à explorer parce qu'on a un gros chantier de rattrapage en habitation. Là. Donc, démocratiser l'exécution de ce chantier-là, puis essayer de compenser notre manque de capital assez flagrant là, par justement comme il appelait ça, de l'équité de sueur. Là. Ça pourrait être une belle solution. Donc, oui, ça m'a donné des idées, puis ça m'a aidé à questionner un peu sur notre façon d'opérer.
Super, merci. So this has gone by very quickly. We are just about out of time. I want to give a final round in terms of final reflections or messages you want to share with people, or what's next in terms of your thinking. Wendy, do you want to start in terms of your next priorities or lessons you would want to share, people could take away from your experience?
I'm not sure I know exactly what's next, but I know I have a bunch of ideas leaving here. But I would like to try to adopt a little bit more and like be open-minded to new business models that can try and make a difference and create community wealth. Because I think that certainly from a rural perspective, our place, a CFTC, for example, can be very integral to their area and drive these kinds of place-based strategies, which I'm sure they're doing already, but they can add value to that. So, but I also think that as we try to change the way we view things and get stuff going, it feels to me like there's some wonderful work happening all over the place that we don't hear about it. And we have to be open to finding a way to hear about these things and share these things, because as I said earlier about black box thinking, like if it worked in your area, why wouldn't it work in mine, you know? And vice versa. And we just gotta, people talk about best practices and that's all great, but if you only hear them once a year, I mean, like, let's get going together and build on each other's strengths and make it happen for whatever we happen to be doing. So I guess that's, in the deference of time, I'll end it there.
That's super. Well, and speaking to groups like Community Futures Ontario or CCEDNet, which are networks for that, makes me very happy to hear. But PK, final thoughts?
Sure. So I think we need to level up our game. We have an election coming up. I travel a lot in the for-profit circles, not as much in the nonprofit circles, and they're so different. Like even my experience here, I've been downtown on Bay Street in a room full of people talking about capital investments with 140 people and 3 women in it. And then hearing the conversation there, and then you go into other sorts of meetings and places, and you realize how not far we're really coming. It's almost as though our storytelling is ahead of reality, and I fear that we are quietly kind of accepting that there's movement when there's not. So here's a good example. Sarah Kaplan, Rotman School of Management, also the head of the Gender and Economy Institute, just wrote a book called Corporations 360, and she mentions in there, well, the roundtable talk around us, including being more stakeholder-driven in the States. And some people think that Canada's kind of ahead of that because of some judicial decisions that have allowed stakeholder inclusion in decision-making by directors to be okay and not sued for that. But it turns out that fewer companies in Canada by far actually are signatories to that type of thinking. Another really good example that's worth sharing is that there was it's called the $1 Billion Women's Fund, which was an initiative out of the U.S., actually former aide to Hillary Clinton, to build a $1 billion venture capital pledge fund to help to redirect capital to women entrepreneurs. So they raised their $1 billion in a few months all over the world with venture capital firms. Guess how many Canadian companies signed up? And there's, 190 venture and private equity firms in Canada. 8. And they won't disclose how much. It is only a pledge. The barrier could not be lower. No one's actually going to hold them to it. But it would have been awesome marketing. Yet, we couldn't even get there. So I think we have a long way to go. And even though the narrative is, I think, far ahead of reality, and we should be careful about that.
Thank you. OK, Michael, des dernières remarques en termes de qu'est-ce qu'on peut apprendre, peut-être des approches autochtones, qu'est-ce que les Canadiennes et Canadiens pouvaient être des meilleurs partenaires ou alliés du développement économique autochtone?
Ben, la première chose, faut le répéter souvent, c'est que les Premières Nations sont extrêmement diverses, autant au Québec qu'au Canada. Donc, ils ont des situations géographiques différentes. Des fois, ils ont des façons de voir les choses différentes en certains points. Donc, il faut arrêter de voir les Premières Nations au Canada comme un tout uniforme. C'est vraiment pas le cas. Deuxième chose, il faut comprendre qu'on ne peut pas... En fait, c'est beaucoup plus long construire que détruire. Donc, au fil des années, dans l'histoire coloniale, il y a des choses qui ont été détruites, il y a des communautés qui ont été détruites. Maintenant, il y a une reconstruction qui est en cours, il y a une réconciliation qui est en cours, mais il faut avoir la patience du processus. Il ne faut pas espérer... En fait, oui, on peut espérer qu'il y ait une solution magique, puis qu'en dedans d'un an, on ait une transformation, autant des relations entre les Premières Nations puis les Canadiens qu'à l'intérieur des communautés des Premières Nations, mais malheureusement, ça ne fonctionne pas comme ça. Ça va prendre du temps. Il y a des communautés qui sont très avancées dans le processus de guérison pour plusieurs raisons. Il y en a d'autres qui ont encore de la difficulté. Puis, c'est ça, il faut être patient. Puis, c'est un message même que les Premières Nations, on se donne à nous-mêmes d'une certaine manière. Il faut accepter que ça prend du temps. Il y a un processus de guérison au travers. Il n'y a pas juste le développement économique. Hein. Il y a des déterminants du développement économique. Puis ces déterminants-là, il faut les travailler tranquillement. Donc, puis comment être des meilleurs alliés possibles avec les Premières Nations, c'est comprendre ça, comprendre cette diversité-là, comprendre le fait que ça prend du temps, puis comprendre le fait que que ce qui marche dans une communauté ne marchera peut-être pas dans une autre, puis que c'est un processus d'essai-erreur, un peu comme pour n'importe quel type de développement, dans le fond. Il faut accepter de des fois se tromper. Puis il faut accepter aussi, parce que présentement, il y a un gros processus là, entre le gouvernement fédéral puis les Premières Nations au Canada de renouvellement de la relation financière. Puis on a l'air de s'en aller vers une approche qui ressemble à l'ancienne approche, mais au lieu d'avoir un ministère des Affaires autochtone, indienne, en tout cas tous les noms qu'il y a eu. Maintenant, ce serait un ministère qui serait dirigé par les Premières Nations partout au Canada. Mais en fait, est-ce que c'est vraiment une bonne idée de faire un copier-coller de l'ancienne approche puis de mettre des Premières Nations à la place, à la tête? Je ne sais pas, c'est une réflexion qu'il faut faire, mais il faut respecter le fait que ça prend du temps, ces choses-là, puis que ce n'est pas juste le calendrier politique qui peut guider ça. Puis ça va revenir dans l'actualité bientôt, ça, je suis certain.
Excellent. Ah oui, on est sur un chemin ensemble, puis c'est avec le temps qu'on va le construire, j'espère, ensemble. Puis je pense que c'est, en effet, comme on a dit tout le long du panel, le cœur de l'innovation, c'est l'essai-erreur, c'est toujours émergent. C'est comme ça qu'on va découvrir des solutions qui vont marcher dans les particularités de nos communautés et à la fois ensemble. So we're out of time. Let's just start with a huge round of applause for our panel. Thank you. Quick reminder, you can register for TED's talk this evening, hear a little bit more, get more into it, 7 p.m. at Innovation Works. The link is on Shed. Buy the book, cheaper than Amazon, just outside those doors. This is your only chance. And I'll turn things back over to our MCs.